In the dense and darkened wood of the unknown, there walks a huntsman. In online hideaways around digital campfires, he gathers the tales most others are afraid to even mention in a whisper. Podcaster, private investigator, and paranormal enthusiast Paul Herring is that mysterious huntsman. On his YouTube channel and podcast of the same name, Paul has heard the stories of hundreds of witnesses to the unexplained, supernatural, and highly strange. Tonight, in our last episode of 2020, we sit down around the campfire with Paul to recount just a few of his collected stories and discuss ongoing odd phenomena around the world and here, in the South, specifically. Not only will you hear of an all-out war between a dogman and campers in the Red River Gorge region, and an encounter with a hairy inhumanoid by a law enforcement officer in western Kentucky, but Paul shares with us some of his own incidents and encounters with the weird, as well as his thoughts on the heightening strange activity of the past year. So gather all you'll need to survive, Nightowls. Tonight, we convene at the campfire to go in search of the unusual, arcane, and unexplained, with the mysterious huntsman as our guide, on Midnight in Kentucky, in conversation with Paul Herring.
Welcome to Kentucky.
The birthplace of Abraham Lincoln and built on the largest cave system in the known world. The home of Daniel Boone, Hunter S. Thompson, horse racing, and bourbon.
But when the hour grows late, the bluegrass state becomes the breeding ground for realms beyond those familiar to the human race. In the east, ghosts, spirits, and ethereal entities roam the hills and hollers.
In the north, Mothman beats his wings along the banks of the Ohio River.
To the west, small green creatures stalk farmhouses and disappear without a trace when shot.
While in the south, the energy of the Veiled Witch is palpable just over the border. Joining with us as we investigate just what goes wrong in the bluegrass night.
And ask the question, how many coincidences are too many? There's no need to check the clock.
There's no need to check the clock. Time is an illusion.
Time is an illusion.
And it's midnight.
It's midnight. In Kentucky.
In Kentucky.
In Kentucky. In Kentucky.
Ladies and gentlemen, the full moon has risen once again. It is the midnight hour for Midnight in Kentucky. I'm Ben.
I'm Steven.
Tonight we are speaking with Paul Herring of the Mysterious Huntsman podcast. Paul has been collecting the experiences and encounters with the unexplained and unknown for the past few years over there on his podcast and the subsequent YouTube channel. I think he's moved more toward the YouTube these days. Be sure to check him out after you hear this interview. We are going to be speaking about a plethora of subjects, as we always do in our conversations on Midnight in Kentucky. We range from what got Paul involved with investigating in the first place, down to what Paul thinks is happening with the chaos happening around the world today and the paranormal. It was a wonderful conversation. We are very thankful for Paul for coming on the show and speaking with us. But before we get into all that, if you dig what you're hearing, if you like this weird stuff we got going on, follow us on social media. We are on
Twitter,
Facebook,
midnightinkentucky.com,
and the Ransom Letter Publishing YouTube channel. That, of course, is our publishing company. Check that channel out, not only for Midnight in Kentucky episodes, but music from Ransom Letter Publishing artists, and hopefully some new podcasts very, very soon. In addition,
if you would please, again, if you like what you're hearing or if you don't like it, leave us some ratings and reviews over on Apple Podcast and on the Facebook. You can leave ratings and reviews there. Both of those help us out tremendously. Get the podcast out to like-minded people. And if you're looking for merch, if you're looking for Midnight in Kentucky merch, check out the Ransom Letter T Public. Again, that's our publishing company. There's all kinds of T-shirts, bags, hoodies, masks, I believe, and different merch with the Midnight in Kentucky logos and a few different designs from the Midnight in Kentucky team, as well as, all kinds of Ransom Letter Publishing merch. So you may go for Midnight in Kentucky and find something else you like. Check that out, though. That's the Ransom Letter Publishing T Public. And one more thing before we get into the interview. If you're hearing this is our last episode of the year. We are in the process of launching our Patreon. That will hopefully be set up sometime in January. We got a lot of cool stuff happening on Patreon. We're going to have bonus episodes over there. We're going to have news episodes of the weirdness that's going on monthly here in Kentucky and around the world. And we're debuting a brand new show called Transmissions from the Abyss. That's going to be something like our Halloween episodes, in which we talk to an experiencer, or an experiencer tells us their story, and me and Steven kind of break it down and talk it through and explore just what people are seeing when they see these unknown, ethereal, supernatural things. So check that out. Hopefully by the time you guys are hearing this, that will be further along. You can find out more information on Facebook and on our social media. But back to the episode tonight. Paul Herring from the Mysterious Huntsman is here, and geez, what a conversation it was.
Yeah, I appreciate Paul coming on and talking to us. It was a very interesting conversation. As you said earlier, he gave us stories from all over Kentucky, just about various things he's experienced and tales that he's heard. And this is something I feel like our listeners are going to really enjoy.
Absolutely. We range from dogmen to Bigfoot to ghost stories to serial killers, perhaps. I don't know. We go a long range in this conversation. Very fascinating. Loved having Paul on the show. Check out the Mysterious Huntsman if you guys get the chance. I know anybody who loves what you're hearing right now will absolutely love what he's putting out. So we want to thank Paul one more time for coming on the show. And without further ado, we give you Midnight in Kentucky in conversation with Paul Herring, the Mysterious Huntsman. We'll be right back.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Midnight in Kentucky. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Paul Herring from the Mysterious Huntsman podcast. Paul, how's it going, man?
It's going great, guys. How are you doing?
Doing well, man. Doing well. Glad to have you here. Thanks for coming on the show. Excited to talk to you about some of your interviews, some of the calls you've done. You got a lot of great stuff on the show over there.
Oh, I appreciate it. The listeners have been great, and I've gotten tons of emails, and it's just it's been a great ride for maybe close to a year now.
Awesome. Well, Paul, I got to tell this funny story real quick. I was telling it to Stephen right before we got on the call. I called you a little while ago, or a little while back, to talk about some dogman sightings that you had on your show, and I for whatever reason, now like that I've listened to the full show, and I went through your YouTube channel, like I've saw your name 100 times, but for some reason then I didn't know your name, so when I called, I was like, hey, is this Mysterious Huntsman?
Yeah.
and you texted this a few days ago, and Mysterious Huntsman, I still have you listed in my phone as Mysterious Huntsman. And my wife had my phone, and she was like, do you have a friend named the Mysterious Huntsman? And I was like, yeah, I do. And she's like, I would have expected nothing less.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the way it goes around my house for sure.
Right. It's you get in that weird vein that I don't think a lot of families have, where weird stuff like that can pop up, and you're like, yeah, that's just how we roll around here.
Yeah, my wife says, hey, Paul, one of your alien friends is on the telephone. It's like, if anyone's sitting close and listening, it's really interesting to hear our conversation, especially out at a restaurant.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, you kind of lose yourself in those conversations. I know me and Stephen have done this, because Stephen's actually my brother-in-law. So we go to all the family functions together, and we'll find ourselves, like, babbling on about Area 51 or, like, Roswell or some crazy alternate realities or something. And everybody else will be talking about, the chicken or whatever.
Yeah, the big game, or what happened at the NASCAR races, like, you two are huddled over in the corner looking like you're conspiring with each other. So
I get it. For sure. And we kind of are conspiring with each other. So I mean, I guess it's true.
Right, for sure.
Well, Paul, we'll start out with the age-old question that every investigator on every show gets asked. And that is, of course, how did you come to the paranormal? What got you interested in weird things and I know you do a lot more than paranormal, and I definitely want to get there with the MK Ultra shows and stuff like that. But how did you come to this love of high strangeness and weird things and UFOs and cryptids? If you don't mind going into that a little bit.
No, not a bit. My mom used to tell me that she dropped me on my head when I was a small kid, and things went south from there. But no, I mean, I grew up in a small town in South Alabama named Georgiana, and this was like the 70s, so there was nothing going on there, nothing to do except for roam the woods and let your imagination run wild. And of course, I grew up during the time of one of my favorite TV shows, Kolchak, the Night Stalker, and I just, I fell in love with the kind of job that he had and what he did, being an investigative journalist. And of course, 1977 or 78, I went to the theater and I saw Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and that blew my mind. And kind of from then on, I started getting books. And of course, back then you had to go to the library, and it's a novel concept these days. But I went to the library and I started just looking and taking out every book I could on UFOs, werewolves, ghosts, Bigfoot, and even one book that I really loved, I think I still have it somewhere, is 13 Alabama Ghost Stories and Jeffrey. And that was just really cool to see some of the old history behind some of the ghost stories in the state where I'm from. And it really, man, it just really, you know how it is. If you ever jump into the rabbit hole, it's hard to get out, and it's hard not to want to just keep digging.
Absolutely. And it goes deeper and deeper the deeper you go.
Yeah, it does. It does, for sure.
Well, you mentioned that 13 ghost stories in Alabama. We have something similar here with the ghosts along the Cumberland. Stephen and I are right there along Lake Cumberland. Yeah. So, like, I had that same kind of experience. That's kind of cool. But go ahead. I'm sorry. Oh,
no, I've actually heard of that book, believe it or not. But just fast forward from being a kid, I was always trying to get my friends involved in, hey, let's go to the cemetery late tonight, or let's go to the old haunted house in town and snoop around. Of course, I was also a big Scooby-Doo fan, so there's that. I threw it out there.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But, even fast forward even more, I've always been adventurous. If I see a cave, I have to go explore it. If I see an old building, I have to go, break in. And, legally, of course, I guess. I better put that disclaimer.
Sure, right.
But no, after becoming a police officer in later years, you ride around late at night and with your partner and your buddies, and when the town shuts down and it gets quiet and there's nothing to do but to meet up and talk. And of course, I started talking and feeling out who likes to talk about conspiracies and the paranormal and stuff. And to my surprise, a lot of officers are, just being inquisitive by nature. They're kind of into some of these things, and a lot of officers have been to some of these calls that we can't explain. And I developed a little team, 3 or 4 guys that are still great, close friends today. We still go on investigations together, and just kind of went from there. We started doing a lot of the ghost hunts at some of the area, like Sloss Furnace in Birmingham, and Bryce Hospital, Mental Hospital, the old one in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And then we expanded into some cryptid research, started camping and kayaking into some of these rivers and swamps and some of these areas that are known Bigfoot hotspots down in the South. And, then, I moved to Tennessee about 6 years ago and began private investigation. And the rest is history, man. I'm just hanging out, living the dream, and chasing ghosts, I guess.
Absolutely. And hey, man, I understand that dream. I feel like that's mine and Steven's as well. I feel that completely. You said that you were an adventurous guy. You're actually in the Amazon right now chasing a demon monkey, right?
Well, I didn't know if this was going to work. My wife drugged me I forgot that this weekend was Labor Day weekend, and she drugged me. She loves campgrounds, so she drugged me to a campground, and Wi-Fi is sketchy, and my cell signal is almost zero. So it's a miracle that we're getting to do this. So
having this, right. Well, hey, man, I think it sounds great, and I like the Amazon and Devil Monkey story better, so that's the one we're going to go with. Well, you mentioned that you were a private investigator and that you become a private investigator. That's actually something that I have been working toward, and me and Stephen have talked about many times. And I've told Stephen his investigation skills far exceed mine. I've been like, dude, we need to do this. This is the business we need to get in. I know that you are ex-law enforcement. How did you come to private investigation, and what got you interested in that side of things?
No, I just, like I said, the 70s and 80s where I had nothing to do but watch TV, and I was big on the private investigator TV shows. So, the Magnum PI, the Rockford Files, the full gamut of spy shows and everything that came out. So I was just saying the next best thing I could do is go to become a police officer for a few years. And then I just kind of jumped into private investigation. I had some attorneys that started using me for different cases, domestic cases, custody issues, infidelity, cheating spouse,
Sure.
And that just turned into doing insurance fraud, workers' comp cases for insurance companies. And that's, and at the time, Alabama did not require a license, and now they do, which it's good because there was, that means anybody just can't jump out there, because there was so many people just doing this that just, thought they could grab a camera and go spy on people. And it's just, way different than that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I'm licensed in Tennessee, and I have worked for companies actually in Kentucky before. I've been up in Lexington and Louisville and not Knoxville, but I've been all over Kentucky, really.
But no, you're absolutely right. And I think much in the same way that there is misconceptions about paranormal investigations, there's many misconceptions about what exactly a private investigator is and what they do. And, there's so many people that think that you can just run out and kind of, do it. So, but, it's interesting because I find that people who, kind of like you said about, grouping together with other officers while you're on duty and talking about these things, I find that people, with an inquisitive mindset anyway, are totally more drawn to these types of things, whether that's, scientists or police officers, law enforcement, private investigators. It seems like if you have that type of mindset where you enjoy looking into things and finding out what's behind, closed doors, that the paranormal and the world of high strangeness is just going to draw you in at some point anyway.
Oh, that's absolutely correct, because it takes that kind of mind to, or you need to be out there thinking about process of elimination. And, someone that's inquisitive, they won't just jump in there and believe the first thing they hear is a ghost or the first thing they see is a Bigfoot. I mean, most inquisitive people, and they want to go the extra mile and do their due diligence and knock out anything that's like, or debunk anything that's normal. Or I know I do. I really try to go the extra mile to make sure that what I'm seeing isn't just some logically explained phenomenon. And because what's left after that is unexplained. And I think all of us that have that kind of mindset make great investigators for this.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. It's funny that you bring that up. That makes me think of something that happened just this morning. Me and the kids were out here in the driveway skating and just playing around, and there was a leaf caught in a spider web way down the way there. And, it looked, for all intents and purposes, like it was just hovering above the ground. And, my daughter was convinced. She's like, Daddy, that leaf's floating in the air. And it's it's funny how things can appear so much like one thing and then be something totally different, whether that's, in the world of the paranormal, in the world of just private investigations, in the world of mundane investigations. It's and you're totally right. Like there's people with minds for that type of work that, you see that leaf floating and you're like, and of course we walked down there and found out what it was. And it was, of course, a leaf caught in a spider web. But, there's people that have to chase that leaf. And that's, the people with podcasts like ours and stuff like that.
Right. And man, that's a great point, because if you're not inquisitive, if you just want to believe so badly that you see a leaf floating in midair, there's certain things that happens, physiologically in your body. And it could be on a very, minor scale, but for some people, they would see that and they would get so wrapped up. Their adrenaline would start pumping. Their emotions they'd get carried away, and then anything after that. I mean, you could almost. I think your brain is so powerful that it could almost manifest the next paranormal event that's happening, because you're so in tune, or you're trying it to figure it out, but you're just believing in it so much. And that's a terrible way of explaining it, I know, but it's funny you bring that up. I've had that thought myself many times, and there's no way to put that into words, is there? I mean, there's no way to put that idea really into language that one can comprehend. But you still, like you said, I absolutely believe that your brain, like that you see that leaf and it may just be a leaf in a spider web, but does it matter? If you never go and touch the spider web and you just see the leaf, you still had a profound experience with something that you can't explain. And of course, as an investigator, you have to go touch the spider web. But, to anybody who just leaves that leaf there, they still had a profound experience with something, And like you said, that's a terrible way of explaining it, because you can't really put this stuff into language. But I hope you see what I'm saying there. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I totally get it. You just can't let your imagination run away with you. And I know it's hard to do that when you're out in the field and something you're in the moment, and then you're in a crazy, creepy place, and you're in the moment, and something feels like it touches you, or you hear a whisper, or you hear something, and if you don't just take a breath, everything's just going to go downhill from there. It's just, you got to get control of that.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And, I think that's what separates, because, I'm sure you've met these people, through your research. There are people who, investigators, people who call themselves investigators, who it definitely seems like they take every gust of wind, every odd thing that's off in a photograph, something like that, and they run with that. But I need something. It's not even that I need something more. It's that my mind needs something bigger to process than just things that I can be like, well, that doesn't really seem unexplained to me. That seems like something that is pretty explainable.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
Right. Well, I know that you said that you had gotten into investigations. What led you to the podcast? What led you to the interviews and that format through your research?
Well, I kind of ran through a little spell where I was like not getting enough. I wanted to hear, or I guess I was listening to other podcasts, and everybody's getting these great stories, and I'm like, I want to hear these great stories. I want to talk to people with their own stories, and I hate the sound of my voice, and I was like, but I'm going to do it anyway. So,
man, I feel you completely. But it kind of helps producing. Like I've slowly gotten used to my voice, so like it's podcasting and producing it has really helped. So, but I feel you completely there.
Oh yeah, I don't like to hear myself talk. Never have, but I wanted to hear and listen to these people so badly. It's like I think of it like back in my day, we had pen pals, and these are like the new age, or the paranormal pen pals, where I can meet with like-minded people, and we can connect, and we can stay in touch, and they can give me their stories or whatever. But I just thought I'd start recording them, and it kind of jumped fast forward from there. It was pretty cool, and I've met so many great people, and it's just been a great ride.
No, I feel you completely. I actually think you and I talked about this a little bit when we talked on the phone the first time. Me and Steven have totally said many times, we just kind of started the podcast because we wanted to talk to these people. We wanted to talk to the people who have had the UFO encounters around our area, and we wanted to talk to the big guys like Calvin Parker and stuff, who I know you did an interview with yourself. And that's the other thing. Like, if you just go down through the list of your episodes, you have so many like notable names. I listened to one this morning, Jim. Oh, I can't remember his last name. The Rendlesham Forest Experiencer.
Yeah, Jim Peniston. He's a great.
Yeah, man, that whole, and I mean, of course, that's one of the biggest cases out there. But just to hear him talk to you, and just to hear him break that story down and break down what happened to them, dude, that's an intense story.
Yeah, I was holding my breath the whole time talking to him, because I was nervous, and I was like, I kept thinking, I can't believe I'm talking to Jim Peniston.
Right? No, I that was their exact feelings with Calvin Parker, because I mean, that's the same level case. I mean, the Calvin Parker abduction is up there with Betty and Barney Hill and Travis Walton. And as I was talking to him, I was like, dude, this guy's been on coast to coast. He's, this is one of the premier alien abductees.
Absolutely. And I told Calvin when I got him on, I mean, before we recorded it, his was the first abduction story I ever read as a kid. And I was like, man, I'm so blessed to be talking to you right now. And he said, oh, it ain't that big a deal. And I said, well, to me it is. You spawned a lifelong search, basically, in me. Or not you did, but your story spawned a lifelong search for me. So it was great. I just keep reaching out to these high profile people, and they don't know me, and I'm nobody. So I was like, all they can tell me is no. So I just, using a little PI work, I kind of track them down.
Absolutely, man.
And I ask, would you mind being on the show? And so far, a lot of them have said yes. So
no, that's awesome. It's interesting with Calvin's story, because I think Calvin Parker's story, influenced so many of us. And, there's so many experiencers who you talk to them about their stories, and they're like, and these are stories, that we've heard for years, like that one, like the Rendlesham Forest experience, major high profile cases. And when you talk to these people, they're just like, yeah, it happened. I moved on in my life. I had to move on in my life. It's
right.
weird how not big of a deal it is. And at the same time, that lends more credence kind of what they're saying, because you're like, what else do you do when something like that happens other than try and move on?
Yeah, for sure. And just maybe last year or maybe the year before last, I was fortunate enough to get to hang out with Travis Walton here in Nashville. And I left after hanging out with him and a few other people that night. I left that place being blown away at his humbleness and his realness. He was so matter of fact. And and let me just break it down. When I was in criminal investigations back in Alabama, or in the police department, I've spoken to I've interviewed so many witnesses, so many, I can't even think anymore, so many perpetrators. I've talked to so many people that I've kind of developed a really good, I hate to say BS meter, but it's what it is. And he was
sure, no, yeah, absolutely.
He was so real and so convincing. And before I talked to him in the middle of the night, I listened to his story and just watched his mannerisms. And you look for different cues. You look for micro expressions. You look for signs of stress, I guess, if they're making up story. It's a lot that goes into it, but I was blown away. That's just all I can say. His story is, I believe it's 100% real, and he's an incredibly nice, humble guy.
He came to Crypticon here in Kentucky, and you're absolutely right. He just tells the story as it is, and I mean, he lets you be the judge. He's like, I ain't got nothing to prove. Here's what happened, and
right.
And I love that about Travis. Well, let me ask you a question
Right.
about that, though, because I had that on the things that I wanted to talk to you about. You mentioned your process and how you have talked to these perpetrators and suspects and things. Do you think that and obviously it has, but just kind of go into it a little bit, because I think that's really fascinating. Do you think that has helped you in the paranormal investigations at all?
Oh, absolutely. I have to believe that a lot of especially in the situations when I was on the street, and I spent a couple of years on SWAT, and just in general, being in high stress situations has kind of made me relax and calm down when I'm in like in a non high stress. It settles you down when you get into
right.
When you're trying to invest. So, I mean, I don't jump at every twig break, or I don't jump at every door slam or anything like that. That kind of helps me settle down a little bit. And then as far as when I'm like in person or interviewing or talking, or they're telling me their story about maybe being attacked by some unknown or unseen entity, I can, or if they've seen a cryptid they can't explain, I kind of got a way of knowing if they're telling me the truth or not, or if it's fabricating a wild story. So
absolutely, yeah.
It's helped a lot, actually.
No, and I could definitely see that. Just in the very limited investigative skills that I've developed over the years. There's people will tell on themselves if you give them enough time. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
if it's a BS story, it'll come out. It'll come out eventually. Some little detail will slip up, something will happen.
Yeah, and you, if I can cut in there, like you said, you give them enough rope, they'll hang themselves. That is exactly 100% true, because I've noticed so many times during criminal cases that sometimes I don't have to say a word. You just maybe start the conversation and just let them talk. But
right.
you have to keep a mental note, and you have to keep listening, and they may talk for hours, but if they talk long enough, and if they're making this up, the story's going to fall apart. So, yeah, if you just I said all that to say that sometimes you just have to listen rather than, ask them tons of, 100 questions, when all you got to do is just say, tell me your story. And you can deduce a lot from that, just listening.
No, absolutely, man. And it's funny, it's cool that you bring that up, because one of the things that I love about your show is, you start out pretty much every show, every guest that comes on there, you're like, well, hey, just tell me your story. And, they may go into a 20-minute story. They may go into a 5-minute story. But then, you always sit there and you take however long they want to start that initial conversation. And then you'll take a beat, and then you'll start your next question. And then you'll give them, you'll let them answer to that as long as they want to. And then you ask them. And I've always really liked that, because, there's a lot of hosts, and this is something I try to work on myself, that, it seems like they do cut down to that question formula when, like we were talking this morning, sometimes you just want to ask the questions and let it be what it is and let it come out the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, for sure. And I have a lot of people that tell me they're just nervous to talk and nervous to be on a podcast. So I try to make them feel at home, or like we're just two friends sitting around a campfire. So I want them to know, first of all, that, I'm not, just going to sit here and judge or ridicule or anything, because everybody's got a story. So I just want them to be relaxed and just talk.
Right. And you're totally right. And, that's one of the amazing things I always thought about Art Bell, who I'm sure, major influencer in every paranormal radio. He had on some guests. Art Bell from Coast to Coast.
I'm messing with you, man.
I was like, surely Paul knows who Art Bell is.
Oh yeah.
But he would have on some guests who their stories are incredible stories. And like you said, I'm not saying, one way or the other, but, he had on some guests with some stories that are just mind blowing, but he never went one way or the other. You know what I mean? He always let them talk. He always let them tell their story. And that was one of the incredible things about his show.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, I can't tell you the many hours and hours and hours on night shift that I rode around that patrol car listening to Coast AM. Right. And you know what? I should give him credit, man. He's probably one of the biggest inspirations. I just loved his show, and I kind of wanted to be in his spot and just listening to all these great stories.
For sure, man. Oh, absolutely. And, it's kind of cool now, you rode around and listened to those late night, hearing all those stories, and now here you are years later hearing the stories yourself,
Yep. And it may never, only people may listen to it are maybe my brother and sister and a few family members, whatever. I don't care. I'm still hearing the stories. I'm still getting to talk to tons of people and connect.
Absolutely. Me and Steven were just having that conversation before we went on the air about how, we're good. Like, we're happy to hear the stories. It's not about, we're just happy to talk to people who love these things as much as we do. That's where it's at, or where it should be at,
Yep. Yep, I agree. It's about connection, and these people like to just be heard. They like to tell their stories without being in fear of judgment or ridicule. So, I mean, yeah, I wasn't there.
For sure.
I'm not going to call them a liar. I'm just going to,
Right.
So.
No, and that brings me back, not to get too metaphysical, I guess, with it, but that kind of brings me back to something that we were talking about, Travis Walton. He or Calvin Parker, these people with these transcendent stories, these high profile cases, who they're just totally cool people who are like, yeah, that's my story. It almost makes you wonder if some part of these things, if some aspect of these stories or these experiences that these people have are not to bring people together. You know what I mean? As sappy as that is, the aliens we found were the friends we made along the way or whatever. But I mean, it does. It makes you wonder if some aspect of this weirdness that people are experiencing is not to bring people together, to be like, hey, we've experienced it too, or hey, we're interested in it too, or we've seen it too, or stuff like that.
Dude, that's a great point. Because most major events, good or bad, bring people together, period. Well, I say
Absolutely.
that here lately it doesn't seem to be the case, but it's
it's everything's decisive as of late. Well, let's talk about some of those cases that kind of brought me to you. One of the major ones, and one of the cases that blew my mind, was the dogman incident out of Eastern Kentucky with Dennis and Christina. And I know that's a surname or a pseudonym, but can you tell us a little bit about that case and how it came about and how just the details of it?
Yeah, for sure. Dennis contacted me several months back, and they were on 2 different episodes with me. But he contacted me originally that they were kind of camping in the Red River Gorge area in eastern Tennessee, and they started seeing lights in the sky, or for lack of a better word, UFOs, and they kind of started hearing like screams and howls down in the valley, and they were up on a bluff, and they didn't really bring up dogmen at the time, but they said there were a lot of weird lights, weird orbs, that sort of thing coming into the forest, coming into the canopy, and actually coming up close to them. So, but they were always hearing these weird howls and screams down into the valley. And then he, later he kind of said, well, this whole area has been known for like years and years for having dogman sightings, or some weird kind of cryptid that resembles a canine walking upright. And we kind of finished up that episode. And then I said, like I tell everyone, well, contact me if anything else happens and keep me updated. I'd love to hear from you and, see how things are going. And I'm a total UFO buff. I love UFOs. That's like my favorite phenomenon out there.
Oh, yeah.
But he contacted me just a month or 2 later, and then he just came out there, and that's how I got the title with that last episode, At War with the Dogman, because he came right out and said, Paul, I've got something going on that I don't know if you're going to believe me, and I don't know if anyone else is. He said, but I am literally having a war with a dogman on our property. And I said, okay, wow, let's hear it. And he and Christina both began to tell me how they were camping and kind of maybe starting a homestead a little bit in an area that they bought. And things were like kind of going crazy with them, with hearing the things like stalk them and, I don't know, howls and really loud grunts in the middle of the night. They haven't seen this thing yet. But, fast forward, this thing brings him a hind quarter of a deer, just a deer leg, and lays it at their front door of their tent. And then it's been a while, but I think he actually caught a glimpse of it it was like almost dusk. And I think he caught a glimpse standing up, and he could see the glowing eyes. He saw the upright ears through the bushes. And he just pretty much said it was a dogman, and it was something evil that he's never felt before. And he felt like they were, in danger. And he knew where their lair was. He said he wanted to go in there and pretty much take it out. And he was trying to talk me into coming up there. And I said, well, we better make sure we know what's going on first before we just go in there guns a-blazing.
Sure. Right. Blowing it up. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was an incredible story, and he told it so much better than I could. And it was a long story.
No.
So it's
sure. Yeah. I mean, it's an intense story to listen to both those episodes on the podcast, or both those episodes. Both of those are intense stories. But no, you summed it up very nicely, and I'll include those episodes in the show notes for listeners. But me and you talked about this, and actually you sent me another case, which we'll talk about here in just a second, just about how active the hills of eastern Kentucky are with dogmen and Sasquatch and the UFOs. Like you said, me and Steven, that's how both of us, I think, got into this, is UFOs. But, it's weird. And not just eastern Kentucky, all of Kentucky and all of this area of the South, Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, like this whole area is so active with these things. But, people know more about things happening out in New Mexico and Nevada, but I almost think that the South rivals the West for weird happenings like this.
Yeah, I sure do. I totally believe that. And I know I've kind of looked into it a little bit, but not as much as I should. But I know, are you familiar with the 33rd parallel or the 33rd degree? Is it parallel or latitude?
Absolutely. The 33rd, man, I can never remember. I'm terrible about this stuff. But yes, I know exactly what you were talking about. I actually wrote an article for a local paper some months ago. It totally slices through the county seat of the town Stephen and I live in. So yeah, it's for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That whole area it just runs through all the way through Kentucky and into Virginia, and then it kind of keeps on going. But yeah, it seems to be. I don't know the name of the mountain ridge. It may be part of the Appalachian Trail, but some of it just kind of bumps into it. But that whole ridge line that goes up through that, on up to the northeast, is littered with mysterious sightings, whether it's cryptids, whether it's ghosts or aliens. Everybody up there has had their share of UFOs and orbs and all kind of crazy critters. And you got a vast cave system. Yeah. You guys have vast cave system too that I think links probably to the Mammoth Cave. And it's such a, it's such a huge underground.
Absolutely.
So there's no telling what's out there and under there. So.
Absolutely. And, that's something that got brought up. I don't know if you've seen it, but on the Hellier documentaries about the cave systems and these little goblins out in western Kentucky, and maybe they've, went underground and come up in eastern Kentucky, and just the extreme high strangeness of the entire cave system that is the Mammoth Cave system, and these caves around Kentucky that go all the way up to New York and, through Point Pleasant and, in all directions. But eastern Kentucky, there definitely seems to be something up there because, it's not only dogmen, it's UFOs, it's Sasquatch, and of course that's everywhere, but we hear so many stories coming out of those mountains. And like you said, I can't remember the name of the mountain range, but it definitely seems that there's something going on right there at that mountain range. And if I'm not mistaken, there's the story of the Gateway werewolf right there to the gateway to Appalachia. And of course, that's another dogman legend right there at the foothills of those mountains. So there's just so much that happens right there in eastern Kentucky.
Yeah, it is. And what kind of sparked my interest, if I can segue into that other story with
absolutely, yeah, go ahead.
That's what kind of made me start looking into eastern Kentucky. Was the next story that you're thinking of? It's the one where I forget the episode number. It was with Jacob, and it's not his real name, but it was with Jacob, and he was bear hunting and thought he was looking at a bear through a scope,
right,
climbing up a hill toward him until it stood up and made a circular shape with his mouth and let out a big howl. And he said, "That's it." And that's another account that that's turned me into like 100% believer, because I've become really good friends with Jacob, and there again, that's not his name. He works. I can't say where he works, but he's in a high level position, and he is a great guy and just totally believable. And he's been, Iraq War. He's went through IEDs. He's been through major firefight. He's had all, and he's a law enforcement officer. I'll say that, but he's had major stuff happen to him and in front of him. And he said this was the single event, running into this Bigfoot creature, that scared him the most and changed his life.
Right. I mean, it's like you were saying, he's one of these people who has been in extremely stressful situations, who knows how to keep themselves calm in an extremely stressful situation, and can identify the difference, or can identify what they're looking at when they're in one of those situations.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And he said, "Paul, I had this rifle trained on this thing that I thought was a bear. And when I started noticing its like musculature and its definition, and then the thing stood up and looked at me and didn't look like a bear at all." He said, "I froze and I dropped my scope, or dropped my rifle, and I went to my sidearm as in a ready gun position." He said, "I thought I was going to combat." He said, "This was the craziest thing I'd ever seen."
Right. I mean, oftentimes I hear these stories and I try and put myself in the situation, trying to imagine myself in the situation. And that's one of those stories, what do you do? Like, how are you feeling in that moment when you're about to get in a firefight with a Sasquatch in the hills of eastern Kentucky?
Right. And
one of the, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I've never had a sighting, and I try to put myself in their place, and I've been out there, I've heard tree knocks, I've heard the howls, but I've never seen anything. And, every time I tell someone I'd like to, the people that have had real encounters and say, "You do not want to wish that upon yourself." And they say it will literally change your world and your belief system. And they just keep telling me to be careful what you wish for.
Right.
So,
No, I've had like you. I've had weird things, and Stephen says, we both had weird things that have happened to us, but I've never had anything profound take place in front of me that I can be like, this is a legitimate happening, But I've been told the same thing about so many people. Like you think you believe in it now. You think that you have, you think that you have an understanding of it, or somewhat of an understanding of it. But once you see it, it totally changes your reality.
Yeah, I bet it does.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and another thing about Jacob's story, of course, that's not his real name, but one of the things that caught me so much with his story is the little details he gives. He remembers the date because of the Kentucky basketball game that was on that day. I thought that was so cool, just because it's those little details that make the story, and make you realize there's something here. Like this is a legitimate event.
Yeah, he's a very sharp individual, very squared away, and he pays attention to detail. And I will say that to me, it speaks volumes that he doesn't want his real name or anything about him put out there. He just wanted to tell me his story, and he said, and he struggled with it for a while, coming on and talking, or at least coming on, let me record it. But he struggled with that for a while. And he said after he told somebody, it really helped him kind of start to heal a little bit. And, that's what it's all about.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's very much of the same, like you said, this, and not that these people are disbelievers or unbelievers, but, I think it's, well, I don't know. You said at the beginning of the show there, it would surprise you how many law enforcement are interested in the subject, but it's still surprising, when you hear somebody tell a story, or one of these people who are, so attention to detail oriented, or, that know their stuff, that know the field, that know the woods. It's still like, those are always the best stories, because that they're looking at something that they can identify, that they've never seen out there before. In all those hours that they spent out there, this is something totally new and totally unexplained.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's crazy, man.
Yeah, well, I listened to both episodes and enjoyed them, but I know you mentioned that you're originally from Alabama. And, I kind of, for work, I travel down to mainly northern Alabama frequently, or at least until the pandemic happened. I was wondering, have you ever heard of the Alabama Metal Man before? Like a cryptid that was spotted down there in 1973, 72, somewhere in that area?
Metal Man? No, I don't think so.
Yeah. I think it was down in Falkville, Alabama. And I've kind of read on it before, and I think it was in the early 70s. Like a police officer got called down there, I think it was started out as a UFO sighting.
Oh,
and then when he went,
maybe I have. The guy, I don't know about Metal Man, but I think when you said police officer, it sounds familiar to a UFO case that happened a long time ago, where they thought the guy was wrapped in aluminum foil, or it kind of looked like he was in aluminum foil. Or
I think that's it? The one, isn't it, Steven?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's, and I've kind of heard it referenced as the Metal Man of Alabama. But yeah, that's it, definitely. And then he kind of run off really quickly.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, I've heard.
That's another one of those cases. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it seems like I saw that in a book, like a UFO book back in the 70s at some point. And, but I don't, I didn't remember where it was. And I just remembered that it was a police officer, and he thought he saw somebody that looked like they were wearing foil all over their body, and just, he thought it was an alien or something. So, but hey, you never know.
Yeah. I know Alabama is kind of like Kentucky. It has a lot of interesting happenings, around the area and everything. So, did you ever go out, I guess back to the call there, in the Red River Gorge area? Did you ever go out there? I know it was kind of mentioned maybe you joining them. Did you ever get a chance to go out there and see or hear anything they were talking about?
Yeah, there's a couple that I have. One of the first guys, he goes by the name of Philip, but he's one of the first ones that I went to around Nashville, and I can't tell you where the lake it was, but we were out there around the lake, and he does some research out there, And I spent several hours with him at his campsite that night. We were like night vision scopes and just kind of sitting and listening. Like I said, I've heard some knocks and some howls and stuff I can't explain. But that night I didn't see anything. And there was someone, most of them that I've been to recently, or not recently, but within the past year, have been more of the Bigfoot sightings type stuff. I remember down in I know or if you've heard of Evergreen, Alabama, they're the self-proclaimed Bigfoot capital of Alabama. So it's a big town thing there now, but there's tons of sightings. And I went down there one night and met a family at the edge of a swamp. And I'm talking, as soon as I got out of my truck and was shaking hands, I heard the biggest tree crash and fall. And she said, "Do you see what I mean?" I said, "Are you kidding me?" She said, "We hear it all the time." And I said, did I just really hear a big tree crash and hit the ground? She said, "Yeah." She said, "We hear it all the time." I said, "Okay." And then all that night, we were sitting again around a campfire. We heard just low mumbling voices or something off in the distance. And I couldn't go to it because we were at the edge of a swamp. And it was just, she said, "You don't want to go out there right now. There's like thousands of moccasins." And I said, like, "That's good enough for me. I'll just stay right here." But yeah, there's been a few places that I've been, and I'm going to try and, get to more as soon as I can. I love going out.
Well, Paul, we won't keep you much longer, but I did want to ask you, we kind of touched on this when we were talking on the phone before, and just a few minutes ago, and alluded to it earlier in the conversation. And I know none of us really have answers, but, the fun aspect of all of this is, is trying to piece together some form of an answer that, is the best to you. It definitely seems like there's some strange connection between all of this, between UFOs, between dogmen, between Sasquatch, orbs, all of it. So what do you think? And I know that you have friends who are in MUFON and several other investigative agencies. What do you think is happening here on a large scale, or, just your thoughts on it, is happening here with these weird things and their connections to each other? And why do you think we're seeing, like in Dennis and Christina's instance, these unexplained lights that are followed by being terrorized by dogmen? What do you think the connections here are?
Well, I'll be honest with you. Here it is. I don't have a clue. They are seemingly connected, because when you start talking to someone about a UFO encounter, and I've heard this a lot recently, you start talking about a UFO encounter, strange lights in the sky, orbs in the forest, or orbs in the trees, they almost immediately say, "Well, I think I did see a weird, large, hairy bipedal something in the area, or I've seen orbs, or I saw an apparition," or it's like, I was talking with a good friend of mine in Nashville. She's Angelia Shear, and I think I told you about her. She's the Tennessee State Director for MUFON, which is a mutual UFO network. And she also has a side project called Shear Research, where they do everything, as well as, the cryptids, the orbs, or not orbs, the cryptids, the ghosts, the UFO stuff. And we're all starting to be in agreement, but we don't know why it's happening, but we're all starting to be in agreement that a lot of this stuff, or if not all of it, is connected. And we've sat around and talked, trying to something or theorize something. And the only thing, me personally, I could think of is maybe the veil is thinning between, and there again, this may freak some people out, because I'm still not on 100% on board 100%, but maybe the veil between worlds is thinning, and not just that we're seeing one phenomenon aspect. We're seeing multiple aspects. Maybe we're only seeing what we as humans can see in our own 3D world. And, maybe there's thousands of other universes or parallel dimensions. I don't know, but I think something's thinning. I think we're in kind of a chaotic time, and I think we're going to see a lot more. I think things are just going to start ramping up and get a little weirder, actually. But other than that, I wish I knew the answers to some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. But then I think sometimes if we knew the answers, would it be as fun? There's definitely a part of this that you got to be like, hey, I'm never going to get the answers, and I'm totally cool with that, because what fun would it be if I did?
Oh, yeah. I know you remember maybe 2008 or 2009, these two idiots came out and killed Bigfoot, and they had a big CNN.
Yes.
They had some kind of press conference on CNN. I was so excited. I took off work that day, and I was thinking,
oh man,
I'm going to hear the truth. And then while I was watching, I was like, it's over. What fun was that now? That's like, but then, I started seeing who was involved and started hearing some backstory on some of these guys. And then I saw the photos, and it started falling apart, as you know. And it's just, it was just crazy. But for a second, I was excited and disappointed all at the same time, because
right,
it's over, but it wasn't.
Oh, that's that's an awesome story. But that totally illustrates the whole thing. Like, what do you do when you reach the end of these answers? If you got the answers, would you want them? Because, like you said, it's over. It's done. But you also said something in there that I thought was really interesting about how now more and more MUFON officials and more people are kind of coming on board. Even we're seeing in the New York Times now where people are talking about Skinwalker Ranch and, how we may have metals from UFOs. And I don't know how much of that's real and how much of that's disinformation, but it's interesting that all of this is being talked about. We're finally to this place where people are saying, hey, maybe these things are connected. Because, I'm sure, like you said, you've been in this for quite a while, probably longer than I have, much longer. But, back in the 90s, it was almost like, the ghost people wanted you to keep ghosts out of Sasquatch. And the Sasquatch people wanted you to keep Sasquatch out of UFOs. And, there was this whole thing about how, no, these are separate things. But now, it's kind of like everybody's kind of coming together and kind of being like, yeah, something's up. These are connected somehow.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool.
Good point. I agree with you. And maybe it is.
Well, right. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. It's like you said, we wish we had these answers, but it definitely seems like it is. It seems like, and you also said in there, and I wanted to ask you to elaborate on this a little more, because I think it's a really interesting point. We are in very chaotic times right now. No matter, your religious beliefs, your political beliefs, no one can argue that these are not turbulent times for everyone. Sure. And with that, we have seen an increase in paranormal phenomena and in high strangeness. And do you think those are connected? Do you think that those might have to do with one another?
Yeah, absolutely do. That true documentary Ghostbusters, remember that one? They were talking about
right, yeah. How that's one of the most real I've seen in a while.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's based on a true story. I mean, everybody knows that, but
absolutely, yeah.
What about, they were talking about, and this is a stretch, but he's talking about the ectoplasm, or at the time, responds to the people's anger and responds to, and maybe it does respond. Maybe, I was talking with someone, I was talking with a guy from London the other night. We were talking about not only air, but we were talking about vibrational what we put out, like a vibe, our vibrationals, if it's raised higher.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, things may feed off our anger. And if you look into some of the demonic cases or the haunted houses or poltergeists or whatever, if you feed that, and if you keep feeding it in anger or whatever you try, I think you're going to manifest something. It's going to get stronger, and it's going to like just become more and more apparent. So maybe there's something to that people, I mean, our whole earth. I mean, everybody is, you know, on a angry vibrational scale right now, and that may play a big part of it. I kind of believe in the whole vibrations and theory, sort of, with the Schumann resonance and all the stuff that's going on.
No, man, you are talking to a totally vibes guy. Like, I embrace the whole frequency theory completely. I mean, you know, a lot of people talk about that, how, you know, dogs and cats see the full scope of these frequencies so much better than we do, and how we're basically blind to the visible light spectrum, and how, you know, things on these different frequencies can be walking around us all the time, but we don't see them because humans are blind to this stuff. But, you know, and they talk about dogs, how they use dogs as biodetectors at Skinwalker Ranch. And that starts to make a lot of sense because, you know, dogs can see different frequencies. They can see higher. Yeah. So no, you're talking to a very woo guy. I embrace the woo completely.
Well, good. Because we can, I know we're running out of time, but man, we could go much deeper.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've got 100 more questions, but listen, I definitely want to get you back on. This has been an awesome conversation. Paul?
Hey, I'm here.
Hey, can you hear us?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, the damn devil monkeys, man.
Like, every time we start talking woo, the thing goes crazy.
Right.
Uh-oh.
There's something there. Well, listen, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to say the Amazon.
Say that one more time. You kind of dropped there, too.
I just said I have to get out of the Amazon, and when I get back to civilization, we can have a much better conversation.
Hey, man, this has been a great conversation. It's been an awesome conversation. Before we end it, I know we're getting low on time. Before we get done tonight, if the connection will hold, would you just give us a brief synopsis of the weirdest case you have ever investigated, if you can think of one that is prime in your mind?
I do have, well, okay, yeah. I'm trying to think of how best to put this. So anyway, me and my 3 police officer buddies were going to Old Bryce Mental Hospital one night. And we, before we move in on a place, I like to break out the night vision scopes and just kind of see if there's any movement, if there's anything. We'd like to check the perimeter, make sure there's nobody else in there hanging around, whatever. And we did that. And we walked up to this place. It was about midnight. And we start hearing this crazy noise inside the building. And we backed out. I was like, all right, well, let's see what's going on. So we backed up a little bit. And we went around to the back side of this big facility. And we saw somebody standing in the middle of the little field there on the backside. And when I looked to it through my night vision scope, I was like, what has he got in his hand? And it was a person, but we decided to go in mode at that point because he was just standing there, just kind of weird. We put the flashlights on him, and the guy was standing there in a full Mike Myers face paint and had a machete in his hand and was pointing it at us.
What?
Yeah. And this was like August, not even close to Halloween yet. I was like, what in the crap is this? I've got this on video, by the way. I've got pictures of this guy. And we, like I said, we go into police mode and we put the lights on him and say, hey, we're off-duty police officers. You need to drop the knife and back away. And he didn't move a muscle. And we're standing there and we're talking amongst ourselves. I said, hey, we're kind of trespassing. This is not even our jurisdiction. We're not even in our county. So we can't hurt this guy. So we backed up and we took our eyes off of this guy for a second and he disappeared. I mean, nothing. We didn't see him the rest of the night, nothing about him. And we decided to go in and we kept hearing things all around, but just the first night going there, and we didn't have any experiences that night, but that was just a weird, crazy story to let you know there are crazy people out there that, well, I don't know, they're just crazy. You just got to be careful when you're out there in this place because you never know what you're going to run into. But I will, the next couple of weeks, we went back and we investigated that place. We heard the old telephone bell ringing that they claim that happens there. And we heard footsteps in a hallway, more in the hospital or the surgical area. And that's where I got my first EVP in the crematorium. Was my buddy had placed a little K2 meter on top of the door to the crematorium. And you can hear him say, hey, if you'd like to talk to us, come toward the K2 meter was putting out, it was just sitting still, putting out a red light and flashing, blinking every now and then. And I'd hear him, just much like the EVPs are. And the next day when I was going on radio, after my buddy said, can you come closer to the red light? Clear as in my ear, I heard, I can't. And I almost threw up because that freaked me out. That was the first EVP I'd ever got. I kind of believe in this sort of thing. But that place is amazing down there. The old Bryce Hospital, just outside of Tuscaloosa, smelled for smells. We've heard foot down the hallways. We would swear we were going to run up on somebody, but we never did. And the whole area has a feel of you're just being watched constantly. It's just not even, it's like a heaviness in the, so right, I can think of, but that's all I got, man.
But geez, man, that is an intense story. And even the story of the guy with the machete, like sometimes, you go looking for UFOs or for Sasquatch, and you end up finding the insane side of humanity. And that's almost scarier and weirder sometimes than the paranormal. It is. It's much weirder and scarier.
It is. I would, yeah. I don't trust crazy humans. So I'd rather run up
right.
The paranormal any day.
Absolutely. But then again, it kind of goes back to that whole question we were talking about before. Is the paranormal linked with chaos in humanity? Are those, do those influence one another? Is that why the dude was drawn to the place, so.
I tell you what, next time, whenever we get back together, I'll tell you some stories when I was on the force of a few stories that I swear was probably demonic influenced. And some things that I saw personally and heard personally and have experienced, like people being way stronger than they should be. And, speaking crazy, languages out of their mouth or just, yeah, but that's next time.
Absolutely. Well, hey, that'll give us a reason to get back together and talk again, because this has been an awesome episode. I've loved every minute of it. And we've talked about some great stories, and I want to get you back on. Before we go, though, I know that very much like myself and Steven, you are a multi-projected guy, and you have a lot of different stuff going on. Can you tell us a little bit about your different stuff and where everybody can find you and find the podcast and all your different, outlets and stuff?
Wow. No, that's a big. I probably got too
Just
much.
give us your life history real quick.
Perfect. So I'm a former police officer turned private investigator / drummer in a classic rock band / carpenter that builds adventure travel trailers. And I also have a podcast. So that's it.
Dude, that's a badass resume, though. Went from private investigator to drummer in a classic rock band to podcaster. Hell yeah, hell yeah.
I get
That's
bored
awesome.
quick. But
I understand completely.
yeah, I mean, for as far as the podcast, it's mainly turned into like a YouTube channel because I've been too busy lately to fool with the, you know how it is. It's a lot of work. I didn't realize how much work.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you can go to anybody can go to mysteriousHuntsman.com, and there's a link on there that will take you to my YouTube channel, and that's probably the easiest way. I'm on YouTube, and for some reason I decided to make some T-shirts. So if anybody wants a T-shirt, you can go on there as well as there's a link on my website also for Teespring and some Mysterious Huntsman T-shirts. But other than that, man, that's all I got going on. Just trying to stay alive and keep the dream alive.
Amen, man. Amen. Trying to keep on the lookout for some weirdness. Well, Paul, this has been an awesome conversation. Great episode. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate you sharing your stories with us, man. Thanks so much.
Dude, I'm honored. It was just for you guys to reach out to me. This may be my second interview, so I'm totally honored. So I've enjoyed it greatly, and hey, let's don't be strangers. For sure, man. For sure, we got to do this again. Well, Paul, thank you so much. Been a great show. For listeners, we'll be right back to Midnight in Kentucky. Stay tuned. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back to Midnight in Kentucky. What you have just heard is Stephen and I in conversation with Paul Herring, the Mysterious Huntsman. It was a wonderful conversation. Like I said, we ranged topics greatly, from Sasquatch and dogmen to that last little story he told us there, which is pretty intense. I can't imagine in all my journeys staring down basically Jason Voorhees in an abandoned building. But Paul is definitely a guy that has lived a life of a lot of different experiences, from a private investigator to a classic rock drummer to a podcaster. That he's my type of dude. I'll love all of that. So let's dive in. Let's dive into this conversation. Let's start there with, talking about Paul's investigative skills in general. I loved, talking about how Paul got into investigating and into the paranormal as a kid. He was just straight up. He was like, I watched a lot of TVs in the 70s and 80s. And I think that's something that both you and I can attest to. Like, that's more or less how we got into things. Myself, more, early, late 90s and 2000s. But the same type of vibe. He was talking about Kojak and the detective series of the 70s. And I mean, that's the same way with me and you videotaping the X-Files on Sci-Fi Channel and sightings. And I mean, those things led, it's funny how many investigators you talk to that are like, yeah, I just got into it because, I saw something on TV and it stuck in my brain.
Yeah, it seems like those shows have an influence over people, and kind of what they gives them ideas and how to, look at things, objectively and kind of become investigators themselves. Kind of like Paul did here. He was a police officer, I think, for around 15 years.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, now he's a private investigator along with, a paranormal investigator. So, he's definitely got the skills to look into things objectively and see, if things are maybe not adding up or, if they're unexplained, and look deeper into them.
Absolutely, man. And that's just a testament to all the kids sitting around watching the X-Files or listening to this show. I don't know how many kids we got listening to this show, but if you're sitting around watching the X-Files or whatever weird television these days, and you're like, I would like to do that, but I'm just a kid sitting around watching TV. At some point, we were all just kids sitting around watching weird stuff on TV.
That's spot on, man. Yeah, we're all getting our influence from somewhere, and I've always heard the expression, you have to start somewhere. And watching TV and watching these shows, and even watching shows such as the shows on ID, which might be a little bit much for a young child, but, somebody, kind of trying to figure out what they want to do, the ID channel and, even the things on Discovery Channel and just the different investigative shows, kind of shows how the process of thinking, the process of, digging deeper into these mysteries.
I don't know, man. If you remember back at the tender age of 8 or 9, I was watching sightings with the cows cut open from the cattle mutilations.
That's correct. Yeah, I remember that. And sightings was such a good show. That's one show I really wish they would reboot.
That would be amazing. They should absolutely reboot that show. Similar in the vein of Unsolved Mysteries. Like, they could totally pull that off.
Oh yeah, especially right now with all the weirdness going on in our world as a whole. I think they would definitely not run out of subject material, and I believe Kentucky could get a few honorable mentions on the show.
Oh, for sure. I don't think they would have any problem running out of news material. It's like we were talking about before we started recording. We were putting off recording the news episode for Patreon because who knows what the weird news will be when we reach the point where we're ready to put the episode out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we've got all kinds of craziness now going on, and, it just seems like it's every week something new is popping up that, would be a show within itself to discuss.
Absolutely. And, as long as we're on the subject, we might as well talk about, how we were talking with Paul about how, with all the, if you mention 2020 at all, and I'm sure that this will be the way it will be for decades from now, people immediately, 2020 has been a year of chaos, to say the least, for many people.
And I don't want to say it's been a bad year. I don't want to say it's been a good year. I think it's forced a lot of people to grow and a lot of things to happen and a lot of things to change. But obviously, there's been a lot of violence and a lot of death with that, and I don't want to downplay that either. But even mentioning 2020, it's synonymous already with just a shit luck year and a shitty situation. And we talked a little bit with Paul about, how it seems like as this chaos blossomed and took hold and all of these different events happened, that paranormal events escalated and that reporting of the paranormal escalated and that, disclosure of paranormal events escalated. And I thought that was interesting. I thought, it was interesting, Paul's take on that and just the idea that, as we're seeing in the world, so too is the ethereal, or so too is so too as above, so below, as they say, But I thought all of that was fascinating, and I definitely agree that, something's happening. I guess Art Bell would have called it the quickening. We talked about art a little in this conversation. But I don't know exactly what's happening, but it definitely seems that with the general chaos worldwide, we're seeing a major increase in the paranormal and supernatural, and experiences are heightening, mystery booms are heightening, and we're getting a lot of disclosure from official sources, whether that's truthful or not, like we spoke with Philip Mantle a few episodes back.
Yeah, it seems like things have really ramped up in 2020. And, anybody who is looking at world events or strange events or anything at any aspect can't deny that 2020 has been just a year of utter chaos, and it's, possibly there for a reason. And then again, it just may be, random things occurring. But, you brought up, you brought up Art Bell, and he was talking about the sightings and detective shows and stuff, and that's another person that has influenced a lot of people in this community, and influenced a lot of podcasters that does these type of shows, like such as Midnight Kentucky, as Art Bell. Him being on the radio and for Coast to Coast for years, decades, and people tuning in and listening to him.
Absolutely. And we brought up Art a little bit, and it would be remiss to not mention Art Bell in this conversation, because he's such a huge influence on both ourselves and Paul, and really anybody doing paranormal radio. I mean, Art was the beginning and end of paranormal radio, and I think it was actually you and Tig who bought me the book for Christmas, The Quickening. Art Bell spoke about this process, how these things are speeding up, and we have a lot of people talking about that now, with the singularity idea, or the idea that we're reaching the end of time, or things like that. And it definitely does seem like something's happening to make these events, these otherworldly events, from Sasquatch sightings to dogman sightings to UFO encounters. Definitely does seem like they are getting more ramped up, or maybe the mainstream perception of these things is just heightening more. Regardless, though, with the monoliths these past few months, with the release of the Israeli space head of security for their space division coming out and saying that, aliens are landing, everybody knows about it in government positions in Israel and America, with the photo that supposedly showed a UFO that a Navy pilot had captured being leaked. With all of that, we are certainly being inundated, purposefully or not, with imagery of extraterrestrials, extra dimensionals, and just weird shit in general. Like we're constantly seeing that here at the end of 2020, and we were at the beginning of 2020 and throughout the middle. So whatever's happening, man, it's so weird that we hit these chaotic times as a society and as a world at the same time that
all of this stuff with the supernatural and paranormal is bubbling to the surface. And so many people have talked about that, from Art Bell to Joe Rogan, every opportunity he gets to talk about the singularity, to Carl Jung spoke about this, Aleister Crowley spoke about this. Several major thinkers, both occult and scientific, and have talked about this idea of maybe moving toward the end point of something. And Art Bell, looped the paranormal into that and said that as these things happen, these strange encounters are going to ramp up. And is that what we're seeing right now? I definitely think it could be. And I liked Paul's thoughts on it, bringing Ghostbusters and the ectoplasm in there as a metaphor. That was perfect. But is that what we're seeing? Are we saturated in that ectoplasm, and that's why we're getting more and more encounters as we go on into whatever awaits us next?
Yeah, it seems like something is ramping up. It's just not paranormal things that have been, kind of accelerating, as the kind of disclosures, even outside of the United States. A lot of people think when disclosures happen, it's the United States is the only one that's kind of putting stuff out there. But now, we have, the Israeli, releasing stuff about aliens saying we're in communication with them, and it seems like, almost every week now in 2020, we're getting some type of new story. And, here we are, just a handful of weeks left in the year when we're recording this. And it seems like, who knows what the new year will bring in for us. And, we are going through some type of transition, as a whole. We're going through a snap of transition as a whole for human history. But none of us really can tell where this is going at this point.
Absolutely. Speaking of those strange encounters, I just briefly want to hit on the two stories that we talked about with Paul from here in Kentucky. One of those, of course, was the dogman attacks on the couple in the Red River Gorge area. And you know more about that area than I do, but I believe that area is commonly associated with. We spoke about that area quite a few times on the show, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. That area, is over in eastern Kentucky. It's right next door to the Natural Arch Park over there. And Red River Gorge is this massive wilderness area, kind of in the eastern part of Kentucky. And it's one of those areas during the height of the hiking season. You'll hear on the news very frequent, if not, once or twice a week, about someone either going missing out there and unfortunately finding them dead where they maybe fell off a cliff, or people just disappearing or getting injured, or a missing hiker got, off the trail somehow and they had to send out search parties. Red River Gorge is a beautiful area out there, and it's, one of the most remote parts of the state. It's also one of the most mysterious parts of the state, just because of that reason alone. It's remote and, it's very confined when you go out there hiking. And I haven't hiked very much of it, if, even not as much as other people probably has. It's, professional hikers and does a lot of hiking themselves. But it's definitely one of those areas that's got a vibe to it.
Right. So you've been out there, you've hiked it. It's part of the Daniel Boone National Forest, right?
Yeah, it's part of the Daniel Boone National Forest. There's a lot of different arches and cliffs and scenic views and things out there. And there's a lot of this miles of hiking trails, and you can get pretty far out, and there's a lot of steep cliffs. And I think what happens a lot of times, from things I've heard other people saying that's been out there, is when people go out there hiking, maybe they're doing overnight hikes or something, and they maybe get a little intoxicated, or they're maybe taking a selfie on a cliff and they misstep, and then they go tumbling, a couple hundred feet down into the ravine. So
you would have to know what you're doing to live out there.
Oh yeah. If you was out there in that area, and it's a lot of wildlife out there. There's a lot of bears spotted out there. Of course, there's all kinds of different types of snakes and all that, and probably a lot of coyotes and it's kind of a dangerous place. You got to be kind of aware of your surroundings at all times if you go to the Red River Gorge.
Right. So that brings us to Dennis and Christina. And of course, that's not their real names. Paul had changed their names at their request. But these are basically people primitive camping out there in the Red River Gorge area. And they live out there. So there was the first episode with Dennis and Christina, and they talked about seeing these orbs of light going through the area and seeing them go over the creeks and stuff. And then there's a second episode with Dennis and Christina where they basically say that they've been at war. Well, the name of the episode is At War with a Dogman on My Land. And they say that they've had firefights with this thing. They've shot at it. This thing has wrecked, their different parts of their house. And Dennis has even tried to get Paul to come down there and fight it out with this thing and blow up its nest. He claims to know where its nest is. But what you're saying is it's almost like the pilot's thing with UFOs. If you're going to live out there and you're going to make that kind of life, you would have to have your wits about you. It's not something, I don't think somebody that lives in the woods like that would misidentify one of these creatures for something else, or would think it's something else. You would almost have to know the different animals that live around you and understand what's happening.
Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart, and you would have to be an experienced backpacker and experienced with the wilderness before anybody would even attempt to probably overnight camp out there on a hiking excursion, let alone live out there off the grid.
Right, absolutely. And this is something that we're probably going to be talking about in our reshoot of the Dogman episode, but it's interesting to hear about orbs of light associated with these creatures, particularly in Kentucky, because of course we have the Barilla, I believe, who is associated with orbs of light and people being abducted by or being taken to the tip of the mountains out in Mount Sterling to be taken by these orbs by this creature. So, there again, we have, and it's the same thing as the Bell Witch in a lot of ways that we talked about a few episodes back, talking about Mark of the Bell Witch, the new Seth Breedlove movie. Before the deep haunting, I guess you could call it, set in with the Bell Witch, there were sightings of orbs and things. So I don't know. I think that's an interesting part of this about how UFOs and balls of light and unexplained lights are associated with all this.
Yeah, that seems to be a common mention in a lot of the documentation of these sightings and these experiences people have. There's the orbs of light, and those even anytime you read about these, that's kind of like a common thing that people see. It's a commonality, these experiences, and I found it kind of like interesting, but also at the same time, like, okay, yeah, that's kind of goes along with these type of sightings and these type of experiences, which this experience in particular seems to be a little bit more involved, as they're having a firefight with this creature and actually trying to kill it or hunt it down.
Yeah, absolutely. And there again, and we spoke about this with Geraldine on the podcast about the things that she had heard about what was up in the Kentucky woods and in the Kentucky mountains. And so going off that, the second story we talked about with Paul, the story about Jacob, who was a law enforcement officer and a military veteran who was hunting in eastern Kentucky and has his sights aimed at what he thinks is a bear until it stands on all four legs and starts howling or starts, the Bigfoot whooping noise that they're famous for. And there again, we have a witness who knows his surroundings, who knows about being in high stress situations, who knows about the outdoors, and he has an experience with something in the eastern Kentucky mountains that
changes his perception of everything.
Yeah, and that seems to be, Eastern Kentucky itself is there's definitely something out there, and you see something in the woods like that, at first you're going to assume it's a bear, especially in that part of the state. But then when it stands on, its hind legs and starts hooping and howling, you probably think it's something different. And, and the only way you can explain it is a Sasquatch or like a dogman or something of that nature, like this law enforcement officer, was saying it was.
Right. And there's such a blend between the two creatures that I didn't realize was there until recently. There are definite sightings of dogmen, and there are definite sightings of Sasquatch, but then the lines start to blur in between the two. And we're definitely going to get into that in a later episode coming next year. About how many different subset types there are of both dogmen and Sasquatch and blends between the two of them, and about how there's several of these subtypes here in Kentucky. Barton Noonley talks a lot about that in Mysterious Kentucky, about the different types. And, it's interesting to hear just about all the different creatures that lurk in the woods of Kentucky, and from people who, are experienced wilderness trekkers, who are experienced, adventurers, who are experienced hunters, and to hear their descriptions of them. And it makes you wonder if there's not an entire plethora of different types of these creatures. But that's something we're going to get into later. But I find that very interesting, considering, the type of creature he describes and the type of creature that Dennis and Christina describe, and, just all the different types of creatures that have been described by people who have seen these things.
Yeah, and even just, in the eastern part of the state itself, there's all kinds of sightings of these things, and they vary greatly of how they look. Some people describe it as a dogman, some people, describe it as a Bigfoot creature. But, not saying they're the same thing, but there seems to be different variances of this phenomena out there in the wilderness of Eastern Kentucky. And even in, Kentucky in general, you have a Spotsville monster out there in Western Kentucky.
Exactly. And all the litany of werewolves we have in Kentucky. I think we're probably the state that has more named werewolves, like the Gateway Werewolf, the Land Between the Lakes monster, or the Land Between the Lakes beast, the Waddy Werewolf. Like, we have so many different names for these creatures. I think we have just a whole history of experiences with these things. And, you mentioned Eastern Kentucky, the experiences with things that are other than hairy hominids or inhumanoids, as Barton Noonley calls them. We have stories of goblins. We have stories of little people. We have stories of fairies. We have all kinds of stuff out there in the Eastern and Western Kentucky hills.
Yeah. And you mentioned the werewolf thing. I mean this in kind of a joking way of not, but the theme song for the most popular radio show in Kentucky Sports Radio, is, well, the Werewolves of London.
Damn, I had never thought about that. That's a very, very good point. Appropriate. Absolutely appropriate.
Yeah, and that may be intentional and may not be intentional, but I do find it ironic.
That is pretty great. Well, again, we want to thank Paul Herring so much for being on the podcast. I will forever refer to Paul as just the Mysterious Huntsman. He texted me the other day to check up on the episode, because, as you guys heard, we recorded this around the Labor Day holiday, and a few different things have set us back in production. And I wanted to save it for a time when me and Steven could really sit down and get into discussion about it and get it produced right and get it out to you guys. But his name still pops up as the Mysterious Huntsman in my phone. So, I still refer to Paul as the Mysterious Huntsman. So, just want to thank him for coming on the show, for being a part of this, for talking weirdness with me and Steven for a little bit. And if you guys would, if you're digging what you hear, check us out on social media. Pick up a t-shirt from the Ransom Letter Publishing TeePublic. Check us out on YouTube over there at the Ransom Letter Publishing YouTube channel. And if you guys can contribute some funds to us at the Patreon for some bonus episodes and for some stickers and t-shirts. Check that out. I know that everybody's not in a position to do that, but it means a lot. It helps the show get a lot further. And you get some cool stuff with it. Some stuff that we're working hard to produce, and some new material that's that I know that a lot of you guys have liked when we've done it on the mainstream of the show before, like the transmissions from the Abyss format. I know that a lot of you guys are going to dig that a lot, and the costs are very low. Helps production of the show, helps us get out to more people, helps us experience and investigate new weird stuff to bring to you guys. So check that out. That's the Patreon. You can find that in the show notes. You can find it over on our social media. That's going to do it for tonight. Again, thank you so much to the Mysterious Huntsman, Mr. Paul Herring, for coming on the show. Till the next moon rises, Nightowls. For Midnight Kentucky, I'm Ben.
I'm Steven.
Good night.
You've been listening to Midnight in Kentucky,
a Ransom Letter Publishing podcast.
Join us on Twitter and Facebook,
or get in contact with your questions, comments, or stories of high strangeness
at midnightinkentuckypodcast@gmail.com.